Today I'm going to share with you an Irish tale called Donald and His Neighbors. And like all good Irish tales, this one ought to leave you traumatized. Once there was a man named Donald O'Neary, and he had two neighbors, one on either side of him, Hudden and Dudden. Now the three of them had farms, and Hudden and Dudden got to talking one day. If Donald should lose his ox, then he probably couldn't keep up with his farm. And if he couldn't keep up with his farm, then he would probably have to sell it. And if he probably had to sell it, then Hudden and Dudden could buy it and split between them. So that night, they snuck into his barn and murdered his ox. The next morning, when Donald discovered this, he was most distraught, but what could he do? He decided to make the best of things. So he skinned the ox, and he brought the hide to the market to sell it. Now, as he walked to the town, he wrapped the hide around him with the fleshy part out, and that attracted a magpie, which started to peck at it. And as it pecked, it squawked and tweeted and said a few words it had learned in English. Now, Donald thought that this was very interesting and carefully reached out, grabbed the magpie, and put it in his coat pocket. When he reached the town, he went to the market and sold the hide for the best price he could get. Then, before going home, he stopped at a tavern. As the proprietress led him down into the cellar to get him his beverage, he gave the bird a squeeze, and so it squawked and said a few of the words it knew. The proprietress was very confused. She said, "What was that? I thought I heard someone talking." "Oh, that was just my bird. It tells me things, secret things, warns me of danger. In fact, right now it was just letting me know that you actually have a higher quality of spirits than you were about to give me." "Oh," said the proprietress as she moved away from the cask she was in front of to another one. "That's most interesting. A bird like that would be very handy for me. Would you be willing to sell it?" And Donald said, "Well, I don't know. I guess if the price were right." And the proprietor said, "Well, why don't we go upstairs and we can discuss that?" And so Donald did sell the bird for a hatful of silver. Now, when he got home, he saw Hudden and Dudden, and he had a suspicion that they were responsible for his ox. So he called them both over. "Oh, my neighbors and good friends, this morning I found my ox dead, and I was so upset over that. But when I brought the hide to market, you should see the prices they're offering here. This is how much I got for just the one." And he showed them all the silver. Hudden and Dudden were shocked by this, but at the same time they were overcome by greed. So they ran home, killed their oxen, skinned them, and took their hides to market. But of course, when they got to market, they didn't find any amazing prices being offered. In fact, it was just the normal prices. So they got the best that they could, and then they went home, realizing they'd been tricked and very upset over it. Now, Donald was having a good laugh at his little joke when he started to think that Hudden and Dudden would probably be a little mad at him. Maybe they would try to break into his house and steal his money. Maybe they would hurt him. Maybe they would even kill him. Oh no. He called to his mother and he said, "Mother, my back has been bothering me lately, and you have a firmer mattress than I do. Would you mind if I slept in your bed tonight and you sleep in mine?" And his mother said, "Oh no, Donald, that's fine, my boy." So that night, that's what happened. Donald slept in his mother's bed and she slept in his. And Donald was right. Hudden and Dudden did sneak in through his bedroom window, and they started to strangle his mother, thinking it was him. Now Donald heard this, and he jumped out of bed and made a great commotion, scaring off Hudden and Dudden, who ran back through the window. And he burst into his bedroom door, and he realized he was there just in time to save his money. Yes, it was all there. They hadn't found it. He counted it. Oh, his mother was dead. It was upsetting, but he thought he would make the best of things. And so the next day he put his mother on his back and he carried her to the next town over. And then he set her up by a well and balanced her on her cane. Made it look like she was getting some water. Then he went to a nearby pub and he ordered a drink. Called over the barmaid and said, "Could you go call my mother? She's outside by the well. Let her know I'd like her to come in and join me. Oh, she's hard of hearing, so if she doesn't answer, just go over and tap her on the shoulder." And so the barmaid went outside and called to the mother, but of course she didn't answer. So the barmaid went up, tapped the mother on the shoulder, and said, "Your son would like you to join you inside." But the tapping on the shoulder actually loosened the cane in her hand, and it fell away, and then she dove headfirst into the well. The barmaid screamed, thinking she had killed the poor woman, and she ran back into the tavern, saying as much. Donald said, "Oh, my mother, my poor mother," and he ran out to the well, followed by everybody else. They were able to use the rope on the bucket to pull her back out. And Donald said, "Oh, my mother, my poor mother. She was a saint, worth her weight in gold." And the townsfolk, especially the barmaid, felt terrible about this, and they were asking if there was anything they could do. "Oh, as I said, she was worth her weight in gold." And that gave the townsfolk an idea. And so they took up a collection, and they gave the mother a proper burial and gave the rest of the gold to Donald. Donald made much more off his mother than he had off the bird. And when he went home, he saw Hudden and Dudden, and he said to them, "Ha! You two thought you had murdered me last night, but instead you murdered my mother. And lucky for me, because when I brought her to town, I found out they were buying old wives to make into gunpowder. And look how much they gave me for her." Hudden and Dudden were shocked by this, but they were also overcome by greed. So they went home, murdered their mothers, and brought them to the town. And as they got to the town, they started to go up and down the market square saying, "Old wives for gunpowder. Who will buy old wives for gunpowder?" The people in the town were shocked by this and forced them out. Well, Hudden and Dudden realized they had been tricked a second time, and they were most upset over this. So they gave their mothers a quick burial, and then they went back home, burst in on Donald as he was eating lunch, and threw him into a sack and tied it up tightly. Then they dragged him down the road. "We're going to throw you in the lake and watch you drown, Donald, and then we're going to take your farm and make it into ours." Well, as they were going down the road with Donald, they scared a three-legged rabbit that was hiding in the bush, and it ran off down the road. Hudden and Dudden, thinking it's much easier to catch a three-legged rabbit than a four-legged one, gave chase. Donald tried to get out of the sack, but the knot was too tight, and he couldn't do it. It was very upsetting, but what could he do? He thought he'd make the best of things. And so he prayed, asking for forgiveness for all the times he did wrong, and he promised that if he got out of this somehow, he would never pull a trick on anyone again. He would never be so mean and cruel to others. And then he started to sing a joyous religious song he had learned in church. As he was singing, a drover came by with 20 head of cattle. And the drover heard the singing and went up to the bag and said, "Hello, I see you're tied up in this sack here, but you're singing so happily. May I ask what's going on?" And Donald stopped and thought for a second and said, "Oh, of course I'm singing happily. I'm going to heaven." "You are?" said the drover. "Why, yes, this sack I'm in was sent by St. Peter. Soon 2 angels will carry me off to the river Jordan. They'll dip me in and wash away my sins, and then they'll bring me right through the pearly gates, and I'll be in heaven." "Oh, that sounds wonderful," said the drover. "No more life of drudgery and work. Oh, I wish I could go to heaven too. Do you think I could join you in the sack?" And Donald said, No, there's only room for one in here." Then the drover said, "Well, could I go in your place?" Donald said, "Go in my place, but I don't know. I would have to be worth my while." And the drover said, "Well, I have 20 head of cattle. I won't need them if I'm going to heaven, so I can give them to you." And Donald thought for a moment and said, "That sounds fine." And so the drover untied the sack. Donald got out, the drover got in, and Donald tied the sack back up again. I'm not sure about you, but I'm having a hard time trying to figure out who I'm supposed to be rooting for in this story by now. Then Donald took the 20 head of cattle and went back home. Oh, before he left, though, he made sure he said to the drover, "When the angels come, don't talk, or else they might know it's me, not me in there, and they might throw you out." So the drover kept quiet. Well, Hudden and Dudden did return, not being able to catch the rabbit, and they picked up the sack, and they brought it to the lake, saying, "Ah, Donald, prepare to meet your maker." And the drover thought, "Hallelujah," inside. Then they threw him into the lake, and the drover said, "Oh, I could feel my sins being washed away by..." And that was the end of the drover. Then Hudden and Dudden went back home, and they were shocked to see Donald. and all the cows he had. And totally forgetting that they just tried to murder him a moment ago, they called him over and said, "Donald, where'd you get all these cows from?" And Donald said, "Oh, well, when you threw me into the lake, I sank to the bottom, and I was able to get out of the sack. But down there was no water. In fact, when I looked up, the water was above me, as if it was the sky. And all around me were meadows and hills and trees and all these cows, hundreds and hundreds of them. This is all I could manage to bring back, but I wish I had had help. I probably could have gotten a whole lot more." And Hudden and Dudden, totally forgetting that he tricked them twice already, once into murdering their oxen, another time into murdering their mothers, said, "We want some cows too. Can you take us to get some?" And Donald said, "That's a great idea. The three of us together should be able to get a whole lot more." And so they all held hands and went skipping down the road. When they came to the lake, Donald picked up a rock and he threw it in as far as he could. He said, "Did you see where that rock went down? That's where the cows are. So what we need to do is swim out to where that rock went, go straight down till we get to the bottom, and then we can get the cows, drive them out of the lake, and then we'll have as many as we want." And Hudden said he wanted to go first. And Donald said, "That's fine, that's fine." So Hudden jumped in, swam out to where the rock had hit the water, and then went straight down. "You got to go down to the bottom. If you do need help, Hudden, just let us know. Stick your head out and call for assistance." Now Hudden went down and down and down. It was a very deep lake. And when he reached the bottom, he didn't find any meadows or air or anything. It was just water and sand and an old sack. And so he started to swim back up. But he was running out of air, and he was getting very, very tired. And by the time he reached the surface, he could only just break his face through and say, "Help me," as he sank back down. And Dudden said, "What was that? What did he say?" And Donald said, "Oh, he's calling for help. He needs us to help him with the cows. I'll go ahead, and then if we need you, we'll give you a call." And Dudden said, No. You already have your cows. I'll go in." So Dudden jumped into the water and swam over and then swam down. And he saw Hudden sinking, and so he swam down to him, trying to follow him to the bottom. Hudden, looking up, thought it was a rescue, and grabbed onto Dudden as tightly as he could with his last ounce of strength. Now he held Dudden's arms tight, and Dudden couldn't swim, and so they both sank to the very bottom. Donald waited, and since neither of them came up, he just went back home, quietly took over their farms. And since he's the only one who's still alive in this story, at least he lived happily ever after. And that's the story of Donald and his neighbors.